waitress on a restaurant floor changes the life of a scared little boy, never realizing his father is a billionaire who will change hers forever. Emily had always been someone who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. Even though she was only in her late 20s, she worked as a waitress at a busy downtown restaurant, a place that thrived on quick orders and constant chatter. The restaurant was always filled with clinking plates, the hiss of coffee machines, and the occasional angry shout from stressed-out customers. It wasn't a glamorous life, and she didn't have anyone to help her. Every morning, she would wake up before dawn in her small, dimly lit apartment, get her little son ready for school, and leave him with her neighbor for a few hours before heading to her shift. Money was always tight. The rent never seemed to get any easier, and bills piled up no matter how hard she worked. Her life felt like a continuous struggle, and yet she managed to keep her smile, because her son, little Ryan, depended on her. That evening, the restaurant was more crowded than usual. It was a Friday, and the city's workers poured in, eager to finish the week with a meal or a drink. Emily moved from table to table with practiced efficiency, balancing trays filled with plates and glasses. She smiled at rude customers, apologized for slow orders, and kept her patience even when people snapped at her for trivial things. Her hands were sore, her feet ached, but she had trained herself to push the pain aside. She thought about her son's homework waiting for her at home and the small sandwich she'd packed for him. She reminded herself again that every hour she worked was for him, his future, his safety, his happiness. It was exhausting. But it was also the only thing that gave her life meaning. As she carried a tray through the crowded restaurant, she noticed a man and a boy who had just walked in. They weren't like the usual customers. The man was tall, dressed in a crisp black suit that looked expensive, and he carried himself with a quiet authority that made people glance at him, even subconsciously. He didn't look angry, but he didn't look happy either. His eyes kept flicking to his phone, and occasionally he would sigh in frustration. Emily was used to reading people quickly, and she could sense that something about them was unusual. The boy, sitting silently next to him, looked even more out of place. He was small, with a mop of brown hair that fell into his eyes, and he seemed tense, almost afraid. He kept looking down at the table, fidgeting with his fingers, and every so often he would cover his ears with his hands. The boy didn't say a word, and it was obvious he didn't want to be there. Emily's curiosity was piqued. But she didn't think too much of it at first. There were always children who got restless in restaurants. She went over to take their order. The boy didn't respond, only staring at the table. The man, speaking in a calm but slightly impatient tone, ordered a few dishes and a drink. Emily nodded, jotting everything down, but she kept glancing at the boy. Something about him tugged at her heart. He seemed so small, so fragile, as if the world had already weighed him down before he had even learned to walk properly. Emily remembered her own son at that age, and a pang of empathy struck her. She didn't just see a child. She saw a soul struggling to feel safe. As she set the first plate in front of the boy, he suddenly recoiled. He slid quietly under the table, his small body curling up, shaking slightly. The movement was almost imperceptible, but Emily noticed it immediately. Her instincts kicked in. She had dealt with anxious children before, but something about this boy was different. He didn't just want to hide from the world. He seemed genuinely terrified of it. His father didn't notice at first, absorbed in his phone, but Emily saw the tension in the boy's tiny body, the way he trembled. She felt a mix of concern and determination rise inside her. This wasn't just another table to serve. This was someone who needed her attention, someone who needed comfort. Even if they didn't know how to ask for it, Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm herself as much as the boy needed to be calmed. She crouched slightly, speaking softly. "Hey there, it's okay. No one's going to hurt you." Her voice was gentle but confident, and she let out a small laugh as she tried to make the atmosphere lighter. "I've got a little boy myself. He's a handful sometimes, but we figure things out together." Her words were simple, but she hoped they would reach him. For a moment, nothing happened. The boy stayed under the table, quiet and tense. But Emily didn't give up. She moved a little closer, kneeling on the floor beside him. It wasn't conventional behavior for a waitress. She could hear the murmurs and whispers from other customers, but she didn't care. This boy needed someone who cared more than appearances or etiquette. The man finally looked up from his phone and noticed Emily on the floor next to his son. His eyes widened slightly. He seemed startled, maybe even embarrassed, but he didn't intervene. Emily looked at him and gave a small, reassuring nod, silently telling him that she had it under control. She focused back on the boy, extending her hand gently. "Hi, I'm Emily," she whispered. "Do you want to tell me your name?" The boy didn't respond at first, but he peeked out from under the table slightly, curiosity mixed with fear in his eyes. Emily smiled. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Time seemed to slow down as she stayed there, speaking softly, making silly faces, and gently talking about small, everyday things: the weather, her son, funny things that happened in the restaurant. Slowly, the boy's breathing started to even out. He shifted his body a little, inching out from under the table. Emily's heart lifted. She had reached him. She knew that sometimes the smallest gestures, kneeling, speaking softly, showing genuine concern, could break through walls built by fear and anxiety. And in that moment, Emily felt something shift, not just in the boy, but in herself. She felt powerful in a way she hadn't felt before. She realized she could make a difference, even in tiny moments that seemed insignificant to the rest of the world. Meanwhile, the man continued to watch silently, intrigued and uncertain. He didn't know her, didn't know her story, but he could see the effect she had on his son. Emily didn't know who he was either, but she didn't need to. Her focus was entirely on the boy, who now let her guide him out from under the table, sitting properly for the first time since they arrived. The restaurant was noisy, people talking and laughing, but in that little corner, it felt like a quiet bubble where only the three of them existed. Emily had never imagined that a single moment of kindness could have such an immediate impact as she returned to her duties. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the boy and his father. Something told her their story was different, that there was more to this man than met the eye. Yet for now, she pushed those thoughts aside, reminding herself that her job was to care for people, even if only for a few minutes at a time. She carried on with her shift, serving other tables, smiling at demanding customers. But the image of that little boy under the table stayed with her. She didn't know it yet, but this ordinary day filled with ordinary struggles was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Emily had never planned to crawl under a restaurant table, but at that moment she didn't hesitate. The boy's small body trembled, curled up as if the floor itself was the only place that could protect him. Other customers looked at her strangely, some whispering to each other, but she ignored them. To Emily, this wasn't about appearances, it was about a child who needed comfort. She lowered herself carefully, knees and hands touching the cool tiles, until she was level with him. "Hey there," she whispered, keeping her voice soft, calm, and steady. "I'm Emily. You're safe, okay? No one is going to hurt you." The boy peeked at her from under the table, his wide brown eyes full of fear. He didn't say a word. He barely even blinked. Emily could see the tension in every muscle of his tiny frame. He flinched when the waiter walked past or when a chair scraped the floor. Emily realized he must be used to being careful, to being on alert, and her heart tightened. "I have a little boy too," she continued gently, leaning closer so her presence felt friendly, not threatening. "He's about your age. Sometimes he gets scared too, but we figure things out together." She tried a small smile, even though her cheeks were pressed against the cold floor. "Do you want to tell me your name?" The boy hesitated, then whispered a barely audible, "Ethan." Emily nodded, her smile growing. "Ethan, that's a nice name. You know, I think your name is special, just like you." She paused to let her words sink in, speaking slowly and carefully, making sure he could understand. Then, she did something silly. She made a little paper airplane with a napkin she had grabbed from the table, folding it clumsily. She threw it gently toward him. He flinched at first, then watched it land beside him. Emily tried again, this time folding it a bit better. When it landed, she tapped it with her finger so it slid closer to him. Ethan's lips twitched almost like a tiny, nervous smile. It was small, but Emily knew it was progress. Time passed slowly, Emily continued talking, telling small, simple stories about her son and about life at the restaurant. She told Ethan how sometimes a pancake would fall on the floor, and they would both laugh about it. She told him how she once spilled coffee on herself and had to hide behind a chair until she stopped laughing. Her words were gentle and playful, meant to distract him from the fear that had him curled up like a frightened animal. Every few moments, she reached a little closer, letting him feel her presence without pushing him. Eventually, Ethan inched out from under the table, sitting on the floor with his legs crossed. Emily smiled softly, giving him a little nod of encouragement. "You're doing great." She tapped the floor lightly beside her, inviting him to move closer. Hesitantly, he scooted toward her, and she placed her hand gently on his shoulder, letting him feel that she was there to help, not to control. Emily noticed that the boy's breathing, which had been shallow and quick, started to slow. His tiny body no longer shook as violently. He was beginning to feel safe. Meanwhile, his father, seated at the table, looked up from his phone. He had been watching this quietly, not interfering. There was a flicker of amazement in his eyes. He didn't expect anyone to have such patience with Ethan, who rarely allowed anyone to come near him. Daniel, as he would later introduce himself, had tried everything therapists, friends, even family members, but no one had ever managed to connect with his son in such a gentle and human way. Watching Emily crawl under the table and speak softly to his child, he felt a mix of relief and astonishment. Someone, a complete stranger, broken through the walls his son had built around himself. Emily continued her gentle conversation, using humor, soft gestures, and small playful actions to help Ethan relax. She leaned a little closer, making sure she wasn't crowding him. "Do you like drawing?" she asked softly, noticing a small notebook in his backpack that he had tucked under the table. Ethan nodded slowly, hesitating, then pulled the notebook out. Emily saw sketches of houses, animals, and small figures. "These are amazing," she whispered. "You have a real talent. I wish I could draw like this." Ethan looked up at her, a flicker of pride lighting up his eyes. For the first time that evening, he felt noticed for who he was, not just for the fears he carried. Emily made small, encouraging gestures. She showed him a few doodles of her own on a scrap of paper, silly faces and stick figures, and laughed softly when he copied one of them. He giggled, a small, delicate sound that felt like music to Emily's ears. She had never felt happier in a restaurant, kneeling on the floor, than in that exact moment. The noise of the busy eatery faded into the background. It no longer mattered that her apron was dusty, her knees sore, or that people were staring. Nothing mattered except that this frightened little boy was beginning to trust her. Minutes turned into nearly half an hour. But Emily stayed. She spoke to him about harmless, everyday things, favorite foods, fun games, and pets. She made silly animal noises and exaggerated gestures. Ethan responded, laughing quietly, his body loosening up. His fingers no longer twitched nervously, and his eyes sparkled with a small light of joy. Emily could feel her heart swell with relief and pride. She thought about how rare it was to see this transformation in someone so guarded. She had only shown patience, care, and a little courage. And it had worked. Eventually, Emily carefully guided Ethan out from under the table onto a chair, letting him sit properly. "See? You did it? You're safe now," she whispered. He glanced at her, a shy, grateful smile forming on his lips. Daniel, the father, watched from the table, emotions evident on his face. He looked at Emily with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. He had never seen anyone connect with his son in such a genuine, human way. Emily returned to her duties, moving to another table, but she kept glancing at Ethan, making sure he remained calm. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing she had made a difference in someone's life. Even if just for a moment, as the evening continued, Emily reflected on what had happened. She knew that not every child responded to kindness, and not every situation was easy to manage. Yet, here she had found a connection, a brief but meaningful bond that reminded her why she worked so hard. Her life, full of struggles and exhaustion, had just intersected with someone else's world in a way she couldn't have imagined. For a small, nervous boy named Ethan, A stranger on a restaurant floor had become a source of comfort, a safe place, and perhaps even the beginning of a new chapter. She didn't yet know who his father was, nor did she realize how this single act of kindness would change everything. But for that night, kneeling on a cold tile floor, Emily felt an extraordinary sense of purpose. She had shown that patience, empathy, and a little courage could create miracles in the most ordinary places. And for Ethan, the small boy who had hidden under a table, she had given him something priceless. The first feeling of safety and trust he had experienced in a long time. The day after that evening at the restaurant, Emily thought about Ethan and his father constantly. She could not shake the memory of the small boy's trembling hands or the way his eyes, once filled with fear, had started to shine with trust. She went about her shifts as usual, carrying trays of food and trying to serve impatient customers with her usual smile, but her mind kept drifting back to the boy under the table. She wondered if he had made it home safely, if his father had spoken to him, or if he would remember her. The memory filled her with a strange mixture of pride and curiosity. She had no idea that her life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. It was late morning when a sleek, black car pulled up outside the restaurant. Emily, wiping down tables after the breakfast rush, noticed the vehicle immediately. It was shiny, spotless, and clearly expensive. A man in a uniform stood at the door, waiting. Emily paused, her heart beating faster. Something told her this was not an ordinary customer or a regular delivery. The doorman approached her and said politely, "Miss, Mr. Anderson would like to see you." The words shocked her so much that she almost dropped the rag she was holding. She blinked and asked, "Mr. Anderson? Who is that?" The man just smiled and repeated, "He's waiting inside. Please come with me." Emily's stomach sank, with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. She had no idea what this could mean. She glanced back at the restaurant, where the other waiters were busy, and felt a surge of anxiety. Was she in trouble? Had she done something wrong? She took a deep breath, wiped her hands on her apron, and followed the uniformed man to the car. The doors opened, and she was invited inside. The leather seats were soft and warm. The interior smelled of fresh leather and faint perfume. Emily tried to calm herself. This was completely unexpected. And yet there was something about the situation that made her heart race with anticipation. The drive to the address was quiet. Emily kept thinking about the previous night, about Ethan and how fragile he had seemed. She wondered what the man waiting for her could want. Were they upset about something? Did she need to apologize? She tried to prepare herself for anything, but nothing could have prepared her for the truth. The car stopped in front of a tall glass building that reflected the sunlight in dazzling patterns. She had seen similar buildings in magazines, places that belonged to the richest people in the city, but she had never imagined she would step inside one herself. Inside the building. The lobby was enormous, with high ceilings, sparkling marble floors, and modern art that looked both beautiful and intimidating. Emily felt small, overwhelmed, and out of place. The uniformed man led her to an elevator, and moments later, they reached the top floor. As the doors opened, she saw a man waiting for her. He was tall, with dark, thoughtful eyes, and dressed in a suit that seemed almost too perfect for any ordinary day. He smiled warmly when he saw her, and in that moment, Emily felt a flicker of reassurance. She could sense kindness behind his carefully composed exterior. "Emily, thank you for coming," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I am Daniel Anderson, Ethan's father." The words hit her like a wave. Ethan's father? The man from the restaurant? Emily felt her knees weaken slightly. She had no idea that this quiet, elegant man was the boy's parentor, that he was a man of such prominence and wealth. She took a deep breath and nodded, unsure of what to say. Daniel continued, "I wanted to speak to you personally because of what you did for my son last night. I've never seen anyone connect with him like that. You have a gift, Emily, a gift of patience and kindness that is rare." Emily felt a rush of emotions, embarrassment, pride, and disbelief. She had only done what felt natural, what any mother would do if faced with a frightened child. But Daniel's words were sincere, filled with gratitude that she could feel deep in her chest. He led her to a more private office, where she could sit comfortably. Emily noticed the view from the windows. The entire city stretched out below, cars moving like tiny toys, people rushing on the streets. It was breathtaking, and yet she felt oddly disconnected from it. Her life was simple, full of struggles, and yet here she was, in the office of a man who controlled vast amounts of money and influence. And yet, despite the luxury and power surrounding her, Emily felt grounded, because she knew why she was here. Daniel spoke quietly about Ethan. He explained that his son had autism, and that his condition made it very hard for him to interact with others. Therapists, friends, and even family members had tried, but nothing worked. Ethan had walls built around himself, walls that kept the world out and kept people from understanding him. Daniel's voice softened as he said, "I've spent years trying to find someone who could reach him, who could connect with him in a way that goes beyond therapy or instruction. And last night you did that." Emily listened, stunned. She had never thought of her actions as extraordinary. She had simply followed her instincts, shown empathy, and treated a frightened child with care. She hadn't realized that the smallest gestures, kneeling on the floor, speaking softly, making a little paper airplane, could have such a profound impact on a boy who had spent his life retreating from the world. Her mind raced, thinking about how life could be unpredictable, how one moment of courage could change everything. Daniel went on to explain his request. "I want you to consider spending time with Ethan, Emily. I want you to be part of his life, helping him feel safe, helping him grow, and perhaps even helping me understand him better. I know this is not an ordinary request, and I understand if you hesitate." Emily's heart pounded. She had never been offered anything like this before. The thought of being part of Ethan's life was both thrilling and terrifying. She had responsibilities, a son of her own, and a life that was already complicated. But at the same time, she felt a sense of purpose rising within her, a chance to make a real difference in someone's life. Beyond the fleeting moments she was used to in her restaurant work, she hesitated, thinking about the implications. This was a billionaire's child, someone far removed from her world of modest earnings and small apartments. Could she really fit in? Would she be accepted? Would she fail? But then she thought about Ethan, about the trust he had shown, about the trembling little boy who had finally looked at her with hope. She realized that she could not ignore this. She could not let fear stop her from doing something meaningful. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. I would like to help him," she said softly. Daniel smiled, relief and gratitude lighting up his features. "Thank you, Emily. You have no idea how much this means to me, to Ethan, and to our family." He paused, then added, "You have a rare quality. Patience, kindness, empathy. These are things money cannot buy, and yet you have them in abundance." Emily felt a warmth spreading through her chest. No one had ever said such things to her before. She had worked hard all her life, struggled to survive, and yet she had never imagined that her actions could be valued in this way. They spent the next hour discussing Ethan's routines, his likes and dislikes, and how Emily could help him feel safe. Daniel spoke openly, without pretense, showing not just his wealth, but his genuine concern for his son. Emily took notes, asked questions, and offered suggestions, her heart swelling with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen for her job, her struggles, or her limitations. But for the qualities that mattered most, her heart and her ability to care deeply for another human being. As Emily left the building that day, she felt like she was stepping into a completely new world. She didn't know how this would unfold, or how she would balance her life with this extraordinary opportunity. But she felt a sense of purpose she had never known. She had gone to work that day as a waitress, serving food and carrying trays. And she had left knowing that her small act of kindness had opened a door to something far greater than she could have imagined. She didn't yet know what the future held, but she knew that her life and Ethan's would never be the same again. Emily had never imagined that her life would take such an unexpected turn. One moment, she was kneeling on a restaurant floor, comforting a frightened little boy. The next, she was being invited into the life of a child she barely knew, in a world far removed from her own. The first few days after meeting Daniel and Ethan were a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and adjustment. Emily found herself navigating an unfamiliar environment, a luxurious home filled with bright rooms, soft carpets, and toys and gadgets she had never seen before. It was overwhelming, yet she knew her role was simple in its essence: to help Ethan feel safe, understood, and loved. Ethan was different from any child Emily had ever known. He was highly sensitive to sounds, sudden movements, and even simple gestures. Loud voices made him anxious, and he often flinched at unexpected touches. Emily quickly realized that patience would be her most important tool. She started small, sitting on the floor with him, speaking softly, letting him lead the interactions. At first, Ethan barely acknowledged her presence. He would sit quietly in a corner, observing her, and sometimes he would make noises or gestures that Emily didn't understand. But she never left him alone or forced him to act differently. She learned that trust could not be rushed. It had to be earned. One calm, gentle moment at a time, Emily began to learn Ethan's little routines. She noticed that he liked patterns, certain toys, and specific songs that soothed him. Mornings were often the hardest, as he resisted leaving his room and starting the day. Emily would kneel by his bed, speaking softly, "Good morning, Ethan. The sun is up and it's a new day. We can take it slowly, step by step." Some mornings, he would cling to her hand, and she would let him guide the pace. Other mornings, he would retreat, and Emily would give him space, sitting quietly nearby until he felt ready. It was a delicate balance, but she began to understand him better than anyone else had. One afternoon, Emily brought out a box of crayons and paper. "Would you like to draw with me?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded slightly. For the first time, he picked up a crayon and started making shapes on the paper. Emily copied some of his drawings, laughing gently at her own clumsy attempts. "Look, we're both artists," she said. Ethan looked up at her, a small smile forming. It was a breakthrough, a tiny but significant moment. Over the next few weeks, these sessions became routine. They drew together, colored together, and slowly, Ethan began to open up in ways that shocked even Daniel. Daniel, observing all of this, could hardly believe the transformation. His son, who had spent years in silence and fear, was now laughing, experimenting with colors, and even speaking a few words during their sessions. He watched Emily with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. She had brought a warmth into their lives that no therapy, wealth, or professional intervention had managed to achieve. Her presence was like a gentle light that penetrated the shadows around Ethan, giving him confidence, joy, and a sense of safety. Daniel realized that he had underestimated the power of simple human kindness. Emily also became a bridge between Daniel and Ethan. She helped Daniel understand what made Ethan anxious, how to respond to his sudden fears, and what small gestures could comfort him. They spent hours discussing routines, sharing observations, and planning activities that would help Ethan feel secure. Emily noticed that Daniel, who was usually composed and serious, began to smile more, laugh more, and even play with Ethan. She saw a softer side of him, a man deeply in love with his son, but unsure how to connect until Emily arrived. The bond between Emily and Ethan grew steadily. She learned the little things that mattered, the songs that made him smile, the texture of certain toys he loved to touch, the gentle way to approach him when he was anxious. In return, Ethan began to trust her in ways that amazed everyone around him. He would run to her for comfort, curl up beside her during story time, and even initiate small conversations. Emily noticed subtle changes. He started responding to questions. He began attempting new activities, and he laughed more freely. Each small victory felt monumental, and Emily felt proud, though she never sought recognition. She was motivated purely by the happiness and comfort of this little boy. At times, Emily reflected on her own life. She realized that in helping Ethan, she had also begun to heal herself. The struggles she had faced as a single mother, the long shifts, and the constant worry about money had left her feeling exhausted and alone. Yet in this home, working with Ethan, she discovered a new sense of purpose. She was not just surviving. She was making a real, tangible difference. Her confidence grew, and with it, a quiet joy that she hadn't felt in years. Daniel noticed the effect Emily had on both his son and himself. He began to admire not only her patience and skill, but also her compassion, humility, and resilience. There were moments when he found himself lingering in the doorway, watching her interact with Ethan, feeling a warmth he could not put into words. Emily, meanwhile, treated him kindly, but without pretense. She was never intimidated by his wealth or status, and that grounded him. He realized that he was drawn to her not because of her role with Ethan, but because of the person she was: genuine, caring, and courageous. One rainy afternoon, Emily took Ethan to the playroom, where sunlight from the large windows created a golden glow. Ethan was hesitant to play with the new puzzle set Daniel had bought, but Emily knelt beside him, guiding his hands gently. "Let's try this together," she whispered. Slowly, piece by piece, they completed the puzzle. Ethan's eyes sparkled with pride, and he hugged Emily tightly. She hugged him back, feeling a surge of emotion. Daniel, who had been observing quietly, felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. It was a simple moment, but to him, it symbolized hope, love, and the possibility of a brighter future. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between Emily and Ethan strengthened. Emily's presence had become essential, not just for Ethan's growth, but for the family as a whole. Daniel began to spend more time at home, learning to be more patient, more understanding, and more present. Emily's influence was subtle but profound. She was teaching a father how to connect with his son, a child how to trust, and herself how to embrace a life that had once seemed ordinary and constrained. Emily also learned to navigate the challenges. Some days where Ethan would become anxious, frustrated, or withdrawn. Emily would kneel by him, speak softly, and use every ounce of her patience to calm him. She celebrated every small victory, whether it was a word spoken, a smile shared, or a puzzle completed. Over time, these moments accumulated into something remarkable. Ethan was thriving in ways that had once seemed impossible in the quiet evenings. After Ethan was asleep, Emily would sit by the large window, reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed. She had gone from being a waitress working endless shifts to being a part of a child's transformative journey. She felt gratitude for the unexpected opportunity, for the trust placed in her, and for the chance to make a real difference. She had not only helped Ethan grow, but had found a renewed sense of purpose and self-worth within herself. Through it all, Emily's connection with Daniel also deepened. They laughed together, discussed Ethan's progress, and shared quiet moments that were filled with mutual respect and understanding. There was a bond forming, not built on wealth or status, but on shared care for a child and genuine human connection. Emily never sought recognition or attention. Her joy came from knowing that Ethan felt safe, happy, and understood. And slowly, she realized that this bond was changing her in ways she had never expected, teaching her about love, patience, and the extraordinary impact of small acts of kindness. By the end of those months, Emily had become indispensable to Ethan's life. He trusted her completely, and Daniel had come to rely on her, not just as a caregiver, but as a partner in raising his son. The transformation was remarkable. The boy who had once hidden under tables now smiled, laughed, spoke, and explored his world with confidence. Emily's heart swelled with quiet pride. She had entered their lives almost by accident, but her presence had become a cornerstone of their happiness. And in that process, she had discovered a place in a world she had never imagined, a world filled with love, hope, and possibility. Months had passed since Emily first met Ethan and Daniel, and life had settled into a new, extraordinary rhythm. Emily had become an inseparable part of Ethan's world. She had learned every little thing about him: the way he liked to line up his toys in a certain order, the way he hummed a soft tune when he was happy, and the little hand gestures he used when he wanted to express himself but couldn't find the words. Every day brought new discoveries, and every small achievement, from a smile to a whispered word, felt like a victory that deserved celebration. Emily took pride in being there for Ethan, guiding him, and quietly shaping the boy's world with patience and care. The bond between Emily and Ethan was no longer tentative. He ran to her when he saw her in the morning, hugged her tightly when he was upset, and even shared small secrets that he hadn't told anyone else. Emily often found herself laughing along with him, marveling at his unique personality and the joy he radiated when he felt safe. She realized that what she had done for Ethan was far greater than she had imagined. It was not just helping him cope with anxiety or teaching him how to engage with the world. She had given him trust, love, and confidence. The foundation upon which a happy life could be built. Daniel, too, had transformed. He had watched, sometimes from a distance, as Emily guided his son through these little victories. The man who had once been tense, serious, and consumed by work was now calmer, more present, and more connected to life. He had begun playing games with Ethan, reading stories aloud and laughing freely, acts that, before Emily's arrival, seemed almost impossible. Daniel realized that Emily had done more than help Ethan. She had helped him rediscover what truly mattered in life. He found himself drawn to Emily in ways he didn't fully understand at first. It wasn't just admiration for her patience or kindness. It was a deep respect and, increasingly, a feeling he had not expected. Affection. The true turning point came one afternoon at Ethan's school. The school had arranged a small event where the children could showcase their progress, and Daniel insisted that Emily attend with them. Emily was nervous, unsure how Ethan would behave in such a public setting. But when they arrived, she saw a spark of excitement in him. He held her hand tightly, whispering, "I'm nervous." Emily knelt down and smiled. "That's okay, Ethan. You're ready. I'll be right here." When it was Ethan's turn to go on stage, Emily felt her heart pounding. The boy who had once hidden from the world under a restaurant table now walked confidently toward the microphone. He took a deep breath, looked at the audience, and began to speak. His voice was clear, though a little shaky, but each word was delivered with courage and pride. He spoke about a drawing he had made, about a story he wanted to tell, and finally he said, "Miss Emily taught me how to be brave." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She felt a mixture of pride, joy, and overwhelming emotion. Months of patience, guidance, and unwavering care had culminated in this moment. Ethan, once frightened and withdrawn, was now standing in front of people, sharing his thoughts with confidence. The audience clapped, and Emily felt Daniel's hand gently touch hers. She glanced at him and saw tears glistening in his eyes as well. There was no need for words. The moment spoke for itself. The boy had grown, and their lives had changed because of her presence. After the event, Daniel took Emily aside. He was quiet at first, almost hesitant, then spoke with a warmth and honesty that surprised her. "Emily," he said softly, "you didn't just change my son's life, you changed mine. I've spent years worrying, trying to find someone who could connect with him, and then you came along. You've shown us both what it means to trust, to care, and to love without conditions." Emily felt her heart race. She had never expected recognition or gratitude in such a profound form. She smiled, shaking her head slightly. "I just did what felt right," she said softly. "Ethan needed someone to care. That's all." Daniel reached for her hand, gently but firmly. "No, it was more than that. You gave him a gift no one else could. And I realize that I feel something for you as well." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had sensed something unspoken in the quiet moments at home, the shared laughter and the long hours spent guiding Ethan, but she had never dared to imagine that Daniel could feel the same way. She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, warmth, and something deeper than gratitude. Her own heart, which had been cautious and guarded for so long, fluttered. She felt a mix of disbelief, joy, and a quiet hope. In that moment, two of them understood that their bond had grown into something extraordinary, not just teacher and student, or a caregiver and parent, but two people connected by love, trust, and shared life experiences. Over the next few weeks, their relationship developed quietly, naturally. Daniel never rushed her or pressured her. He simply showed kindness, respect, and appreciation in every gesture. Emily, in turn, felt comfortable, safe, and valued in a way she had never experienced. Their interactions were filled with laughter, quiet conversation, and shared care for Ethan. The home, once a place of anxiety and fear for the boy, had become a warm, loving environment. Where trust and affection flourished, Emily also continued to witness Ethan's growth. He began speaking more, playing with other children, and even showing curiosity about new things. His confidence blossomed, and he began expressing his feelings and thoughts more clearly. Emily knew that every step of progress was a victory, not just for Ethan, but for the entire family. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her patience, care, and unwavering support had helped a child who once felt lost in the world find his voice. Daniel, watching all of this, often reflected on how extraordinary Emily was. She had not only transformed his son's life, but had changed the dynamic of their family. He had found someone he could trust completely, someone who loved his son genuinely and selflessly, and in doing so, had revealed a capacity for love, resilience, and kindness that he admired deeply. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Daniel invited Emily to sit in the living room with him. The room was quiet, the soft glow of lamps casting a warm light. He took her hands in his and spoke sincerely. "Emily, I know this may seem sudden, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've become part of our lives in a way I never imagined. I care for you deeply, and I hope you feel the same." Emily's eyes filled with tears, a mix of happiness and relief. She nodded, her voice trembling. I care for you too, Daniel. More than I could have imagined. I never thought my life would lead me here, but I'm so grateful it did." From that night onward, their lives felt more complete. The bond between Emily, Daniel, and Ethan was no longer just about care or guidance. It was about love, family, and shared life. They laughed together, faced challenges together, and celebrated victories both big and small together. Emily realized that the simple act of crawling on a restaurant floor, reaching out to comfort a frightened little boy, had set off a chain of events that had transformed all their lives. She had found love, purpose, and a place in a family that she never expected to belong to. Ethan, who had once hidden from the world, now thrived in this environment of love and trust. Daniel, once consumed by work and worry, now experienced joy, laughter, and connection he had never known before. And Emily, who had spent her life working hard just to survive, had discovered that her kindness, patience, and courage could change lives, not only Ethan's and Daniel's, but her own as well. In the end, it was not the wealth, the luxury, or the fame that mattered. It was the simple, human connections that made life meaningful. A boy who had been scared and withdrawn found comfort in a stranger's compassion. A father who had worried endlessly discovered the joy of watching his son grow. And a young woman who had only wanted to do what was right found love, purpose, and a place where she truly belonged. Life had a way of surprising Emily in the most extraordinary way. A single act of courage, empathy, and kindness kneeling on a cold restaurant floor had created ripples that led to joy, transformation, and love. And as they sat together, a family united by heart rather than circumstance, Emily knew that this was only the beginning of a beautiful journey. Life where trust, love, and kindness always had the power to change everything.